Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Swop Space. We have our special guest, Tom, is going to be joining us in a couple minutes. He just messaged me saying he might be a few minutes late, just FYI. So before we get started, if anyone has any questions or anything, make sure you're putting them in the thread. A like goes a long way. It helps share the space. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the new algorithm at all for Twitter, but a like is like a 30x on boosting the post, and a retweet goes like an extra 20. So any engagement is always a huge bonus for the space. It helps bring more exposure, and please remember to give a follow to our guests here, or even follow the Swop Spaces account in our bio, because it helps bring more awareness to ICP projects and all future projects that we bring to the stage here. So it's always appreciated. We have a space tomorrow that we're going to be on. I'm not sure when the link's going to get dropped, but we're going to be with this project called Swopify. And we'll be talking and discussing DeFi. So Daniel will be joining me on that. And looks like we got Tom in here now, so I'll invite him up. But yeah, so that's going to be at 11 tomorrow, same time, wherever you are in the world. It'll be the same time as well. Technically, no, we're doing this space an hour late. So it'll be 11 a.m. CST, which is -5 from UTC time. So our typical time. But Daniel, I'll pass it off to you real quick.
Yeah, hey, what's going on, guys? Nice to be back once again. We've been getting busy with the spaces, having a lot of cool projects and people up, so it's really cool to get to hear more from Tom. I've heard some things about you around, and definitely looking forward to learning a bit. And yeah, so my name is Daniel. I work on a few different projects on the internet computer ecosystem, including the open Metaverse Outpost, as well as I've been doing quite the bit of development for the Swap and Go to Gamer for his platform. So I've been here since Genesis, and yeah, I have a lot of fun here. So.
And Tom, how are you doing? Welcome to the space.
Hey, what's up, guys? How are you?
We're doing great.
Yeah. Where's everyone based? I'm in Boston right now.
You're in Boston, you said?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. I've never been, but I used to be in like the service industry, and is it Treehouse Brewing over there or Tullum?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't actually been there, but I've heard people talk about it.
Yeah, I have a buddy. He's like really big into like the beer industry, and he's like, it's like one of the top. He's like, if you have to stop in, he's like, you must try it. He's like, otherwise our friendship's over. So
I think I actually I think I did go there. Now that I think about it, I think I was there with Alex from Coin Fund. If you know Alex or any of those guys from Coin Fund, cool spot if I recall.
Yeah, it looks incredible. But out of so where I'm based, I'm out of Milwaukee. Technically, I'm just a little bit north of Milwaukee. So got the Wisconsin beer and cheese curd heritage that we kind of embrace over here. So and then Daniel, if you'd like to say where you're based out of.
Yeah, I'm in regretfully I'm in upstate New York. So
nice.
Not all that.
It's not so
all
bad.
That interesting up here. We don't really have too many. We don't specialize in beer or cheese. We specialize in slightly angry people. Other than that, there's not much going on up here.
Are you with the foundation, Daniel? Are you with Definity Foundation?
No. I've just been developing on the internet computer for like a long time, and
nice.
Like it a lot. So
yeah, I mean, it's a fucking great network. For sure, hands down, one of the best.
And Tom, how did you get acquainted with Definity to start? Because I know you said that you're pretty close with Dominic Williams.
Yep. Gosh, that's a super long old story. So let's see. When did I first meet Dom? I'd have to say it was probably maybe 2014 or so. He was based in Palo Alto at the time. I think he was working on Project Phi, so like sort of pre-String Labs. Project Phi was sort of like a decentralized lending protocol that I think he was imagining to be built on top of the Ethereum network, because we were pretty dialed into the Ethereum community back then, as they kind of prepared to launch the Ethereum mainnet. So that was when I first met him, and then of course, we're Bay Area based, and so we, just became friends and hung out a bunch. We were all kind of really, Dom was very, very, very active in Ethereum at the time. And then, of course, over time, as Ethereum got bigger and many of the early Ethereum guys kind of spun out to go kind of build their own, competing protocols in many ways. We ended up being kind of early seed investors in a lot of those projects. So we ended up being early in seed investors into Polkadot and Near and Flow, Definity, obviously, and Luxo, which is actually about to launch in a few weeks. That was started by another friend of mine, Fabian Vogelsteller, who wrote ERC20, Web3.js. It was so much different back then, right? Like it was a very, very small community. We went to this, my partner Bettina and I, we went to this financial cryptography conference in Barbados or something. It was like maybe 2015 or 2016. And I think it was pretty much the entire crypto community for the most part, but you could put them all in one little hotel. It wasn't a little hotel, but you could put them all in one hotel for this conference. Obviously since then the broader Web3 crypto community's gotten significantly larger. But it was mostly just friends hanging out, doing really cool, fun crypto things back then. So that's kind of how I met him. And then obviously, Dominic's just one of the most brilliant technologists and visionaries that I think I've ever met. He's definitely up there, top 5 for me. So yeah, known him for quite some time now. Been a big believer in Definity for a while.
Yeah, Dominic is quite the interesting character. I agree with a bunch of the stuff that he says. He's definitely had the vision for the internet computer for quite some time, and the problems that he kind of reached out to try and solve, they're very ambitious. He's fighting a hard uphill battle with trying to push it, and he's doing a great job though. I mean, he's a hell of a cryptographer, and I've read a lot of his papers. Done a lot of research on the back side of it, and he's definitely been at this a while. So
yeah, he has. I think a lot of what Dom, what I appreciate about Dom is he's actually pretty darn good at predicting future challenges, right? Even when you think about some of the quasi staking elements, neurons, and these different things, how he constructed that in advance of or thinking about forward-looking regulation and et cetera, and the launch of SNS and how all of that works is pretty forward thinking. It's almost as if he kind of anticipated, the most recent SEC crackdown on, say, Kraken, where they're pooling assets and effectively creating yield-bearing products, which is exactly what they were doing, and then not passing protocol fees on to the end user, and just kind of like aggregating and mixing these different assets. These are different characteristics that he knew as he sort of conceived of, the whole neuron concept, as well as, how you would go about supporting the network. And he is fighting an uphill battle on so many fronts because, when he, I don't actually, he and I had a conversation. We were trying to figure out who came up with the word world computer, right? Which is, how we all thought about Ethereum back then. And I think there's probably maybe 1 or 2, 3 people that are kind of potentially creditable for that particular language. But I think he sort of looked at Ethereum and said, okay, it's not quite a computer. It's pretty close. And he sort of deconstructed the computer as a concept and rethought a lot of things that we used to opine on back in the day, right? So it used to be you would never store data on chain, right? This was a thing that everybody said, and Dom sort of said, "Well, why?" Right? And well, it's actually a really freaking good question. Maybe in the construct of Ethereum, you wouldn't do that, given the cost of write transactions to the network, but and the way it ultimately works. But when he sort of reconstructed and thought about that holistically, building it from the ground up, actually you do want data stored on chain. In fact, if anything, you want back to birth traceability to data born on chain. And I think that is something that is challenging for people to recognize, especially when most people are still trying to understand Ethereum, right? Let alone, okay, maybe I'm comfortable with Bitcoin now. Now I have to try to understand this thing Ethereum. And Dom's like, no, back to birth traceability of data born on chain, right? Like, just they can't even wrap their minds around it. They're still getting comfortable with IPFS, So I think that in itself was part of that upward battle, that he just sort of said, no, I'm going to put this flag in the ground, and I think this is the way things need to work. And sure enough, that's where everybody's going today.
Yeah, he definitely got ahead of the game quite a bit, and it was a very, very intuitive design on a lot of fronts, and even down to the technical aspects of the network that aren't cryptographic or aren't layer one, like the WASM, the WASM interoperability, the Candid, like that stuff. It really is an amazing platform. Like in some instances, I find it even easier to launch full stack stuff.
Sure.
Than typical Web 2 frameworks. So he really, like you said, forward thinking to the max.
And he recruited the best, and that was sort of the thing. Like, he was really great at getting some of the greatest thought leaders in these topics, including Jan and others, to kind of jump on board and help him build that. And that was one of the things that I really also liked about Dom, is he was very good at it took him a while. Old Dom was not as good at communicating and talking. New Dom is much better at sort of sharing the story and the vision. But he was a great recruiter of great technical talent. And that was definitely something that I identified in Dom pretty early on.
Yeah, it's definitely remarkable to see the journey that's been made. For the way that like Dom carries himself now, like as you mentioned, like you just see like the full blown confidence and stuff, and
I know, I'm so happy.
Yeah, the full blown direction and the confidence and how he carries himself and leads the ecosystem is remarkable. When did you first get into being a VC? Because I know you started your own company first.
Yep.
Which kind of had its own path into leading into Warburg series.
Yep. That's a good question. I am a founder first. I like to lead with that because that's my DNA. I love product. Obviously love technology as well too. I started my journey as just a young entrepreneur in college. And, part of my objective was to build and launch what was effectively sort of a political PayPal. Ended up growing that company to a few billion top line volume in terms of the transaction throughput, making it easier for political entrepreneurs who ultimately wanted to raise capital and run for public office. I think by the time we sold the company, we had powered 70,000 political operations, and I think nearly 50% of all political contributions transacting on the internet were running through our payment rails when I sold that company. But we dabbled in Bitcoin in, I'd say, 2011, 2012. We had a handful of political operations. I always kind of joke with people. We had the far left and the far right all asking for Bitcoin. And I was like, that's weird. That's like the only thing maybe they seem to agree on. And so, they're asking to be able to collect a Bitcoin effectively as an in-kind contribution to a political operation, which, if you think about it, go back to 2011, 2012, had that been enabled and people just sort of, stuck those assets in treasury and sat on them for 5 to 10 years, that would be one really massive political operation by today's standards. So we dabbled in it, but the infrastructure back then was really pretty complicated. I tell people you kind of had to be a computer scientist just to get a Bitcoin. And at the time, like, we were sort of in the like, hey, we're trying to make payments easier. Like, people are just, it's hard to realize this, but people were just becoming comfortable with using their credit card online, let alone, transacting in Bitcoin. But the technology itself, the underlying blockchain tech, I found interesting and stuff like that. I'd say it was probably the sort of 2013, 2014 window where, Vitalik's working on the Ethereum white paper. People are talking about this world computer concept, these kind of, deterministic state machines. We can build apps on them. We can have sort of composable Legos that allow us to build applications faster. You can, break some of the strangleholds that companies like Facebook have that ultimately contribute to, things like platform risk, right? Oh, I'm building my thing on top of somebody else's platform, and if they change their terms of service, my whole company falls apart, right? And you saw this narrative in Silicon Valley over and over and over again. I think probably the most visible one was the whole Zynga Facebook relationship, right? Just prior to Facebook's IPO, Zynga had their IPO. And I think Zynga accounted for something like 30% of all of Facebook's revenue, right, at the time of their IPO. And they wanted to juice revenue even more by introducing this kind of credit system whereby you had to get these kind of like Facebook credits, and then Facebook would take like 20 or 30% of the revenue derived to further bolster their revenues, which of course fundamentally changed the unit economics around user acquisitions and ad placement and LTV models for acquiring users for Zynga, the gaming company. That one change ended up just like crushing Zynga stock, right? And practically killed that company with a simple, change in platform initiative or the desire to create a new revenue stream at the expense of, Zynga, who was spending a fortune on Facebook ads to drive users. So arguably, Zynga spending enormous amounts of dollars on Facebook ads to acquire Facebook users, they practically built the entire Facebook ecosystem. They accounted for like 30% of Facebook's entire global revenue at the time. And ultimately, Zynga basically died, right? Let's be frank; they're kind of a dead company at this point. But
I mean, I do have to say, I would have to say, I actually, it's really funny you mentioned that, because I actually had a whole trade play for Zynga at the time, and
really?
I actually caught it at the bottom after that happened. Yeah, and I wrote it up. It was. Yeah, it actually was. I believe it caught a new CEO and a new board, and it started to
Don Matrick, I believe.
Yeah, and it started to come back, and they got into more independent mobile gaming. But that's like, it was one of those primary scenarios where you see a company get made and destroyed by a bigger company that it was basically. Its bread and butter was Facebook, and when Facebook made the changes necessary for it to no longer need Zynga just kind of dissipated. Yeah, there definitely was a point in time in which it was just like it was most of Facebook's It was
Yeah,
all the games, everything was Zynga, 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 and that's why
totally.
I kind of bought it at the low. So it's really funny you mentioned that. Not a lot of people
Hmm.
actually know what happened there.
Yeah, no, they don't. I mean, but it's a prime example, right? It's a prime example of platform risk. You can see other forms of platform risk when you think about, you know, Amazon AWS goes down, half of Silicon Valley goes down, right? Like that's another form of platform risk. Or, you think about, back in the early days of Twitter, right? Twitter used to be done over SMS. There was no app, right? It was like you SMS'd your tweets. And as Twitter, the platform, grew and more people started using it, people started building all of these like Twitter apps and stuff to kind of make the Twitter experience better, right? And then Twitter just starts absorbing all of these apps, not by acquiring them. Maybe in some cases they acquired them, but in most cases they just said, that's a great feature. Turn it on. Boom, that app's dead, right? And this was a common occurrence, whether it was Facebook or Twitter or any of these other social networks. They just sort of ate their own ecosystem. And founders would go and pursue these ideas, raise venture capital, and then venture capitalists would just, get completely wiped out. The founders would get wiped out. And then the big juggernaut with the data and the scale and the ecosystem persisted. And so I think, that's one of the most beautiful things about Web3 is that you can kind of put a lot of those issues to rest, as well as incentivize open source software development, right, through the tokenomics framework. And so that's one of the main reasons why I really started getting into it. And then ever since then, I've just been 100% dedicated to investing in Web3. I didn't really start out as a VC, mostly just a founder product guy who loved Web3, picked some good projects, did well along the way, and said, hey, maybe I should go do a little bit more of this. So not your typical VC route for sure.
No, that's really awesome. No, it sounds like it was more organic, and less
Much
forced.
more
So
organic.
yeah, that's usually it's a plus, on a lot of different fronts, just to feel something out and then like, yeah, this feels right. I'm gonna do this. So it's kind of what I've been doing. I think that's kind of what Kyle's been doing here as well. So
Yeah.
And with like, I guess as being, in your position of being a VC and stuff, what kind of projects and stuff do you kind of look for when seeking Web3 investment?
Yeah, as a venture investor into the Web3 space, I have a very well defined thesis in terms of how I think things are going to play out over the span of the next, decade to 2 decades. And so I have this kind of like broader understanding of, or at least a theory in terms of my understanding of where I think things will go. So that's sort of part one. I'm pretty, dedicated to following that thesis and forming that thesis and then iterating on that thesis over time as the whole space evolves. And then from there, I like to think about investing not necessarily into projects, although that's obviously the outcome, but I'm much more focused on investing in founders, right? Is this the right kind of founder to go pull off this particular, challenging idea? How crypto native are they really? Or are they just throwing a blockchain label on their Web 2 app, right? I'm not interested in Web 2.5, not at all, right? I'm on a 10-year investment time horizon. I want to invest in something that people will be using everywhere in the world in 10 years. So oftentimes, that's the one thing that, when founders come to me, I'm like, this is really cool, but I'm much more focused on, autonomous software applications, right? Very cool Web 2.5 idea. You can try to make the argument that this is going to bring more users into Web 3. I don't believe that. I think they're going to come anyways. So I'd rather go invest in the things where once the Web 2.5 stuff dies, everybody will just migrate over to the more decentralized, autonomous version of the same thing. So I'd rather invest in that and then go super long, right? I'm a long investor in crypto. I don't day trade. I don't flip tokens. I buy into really interesting founders that are pursuing really cool projects. Typically, the types of projects is very network dependent. Like Ethereum being much more developed in terms of both infrastructure and middleware, and then key application categories that I think will drive high CPU consumption, right? So gaming, video, financial applications, things like that. And then each network is kind of at its own, it's on its own growth timeline. And so, when it comes to, like, say, Dfinity, I'm much more interested in what are the holes that we need to fill in Dfinity from an infrastructure perspective that will enable more application development, right? So those are most of the projects that I target. And then from there, what's the app categories that drive transaction throughput all the way back down through the app layer into the middleware, and ultimately burning those cycles to drive, more value in the ecosystem overall. So that's kind of how I think about it.
That's pretty much, in my opinion, I would say that's the right way to go. Especially when it comes to, like, the internet computer specifically.
Yeah.
The thing that's going to raise, like you said, the transaction throughput and burn cycles is really what's eventually going to drive the network price. It's going to burn more of the
Exactly.
of the ICP. So it's kind of a win-win scenario. And then you got stuff like SocialFi, which is making a ton of transactions or queries, mutations, whatever you want to get down to calling them. Me personally, I'm actually working on something right now to give new users or any user access to create any asset canister. Like, just log in with any wallet, whip up an asset canister, and upload and manage files as if we were using a file explorer on Windows.
Oh, that's awesome.
And what that'll do is allow 3D creators, any kind of creator, artist, end user, developer, just to log in with whatever wallet they choose, and then in a no-code environment, just kind of hit a button, spin up a canister. They fill it up with cycles, and then they can use the asset canister to their liking and have it be completely owned by them. It's just something like that. That's the kind of tooling I
like
think
a digital
the ecosystem
vault
needs.
almost.
Yeah. Except
100%.
it kind of be like it's like using Dropbox or Google Drive. It needs to be. It needs to, like, because right now the only way I can upload a file is
like
through
gaming assets. I get it. That's cool.
Yeah, like I have I have like 40 or 50 canisters in like, personally, from all the different projects I've built. So I needed a platform that could make me new canisters without needing to go through a bunch of CLI.
Yeah.
But then I also was like, how can I give this to users? How do you bring canister technology to the end user? What is the simplest way? Like, that's a hole that I've seen, is that canisters are typically seen as developer material.
Yeah, that's interesting. We're investors in an IC project called Departured Labs. Are you familiar with Hazel and what?
Yeah, they're doing great things over there.
Oh my gosh, dude, these guys are rock stars. They're so much smarter than me. It's awesome.
Hazel's awesome.
Hazel's so fucking awesome. Yeah, truly a rock star developer. She's been chatting a lot about personal canisters as well too. You should totally link up. That's sort of something she's been thinking about from a launch perspective. I know she just launched like a notification inbox for I guess the firing of events and things like that, which is also another really important element of that. The other thing I've been chatting with Hazel a bunch about that I have been trying to, like, kind of better wrap my mind around is the sort of composability across subnets. And I think Jan sort of opined on it in our little thread. He said it's like like 4 seconds or something like that. Maybe 2 seconds. to be able to sort of settle across from one subnet to another subnet. And mostly I was kind of curious is like how far can we scale that? Like, can you go from 4 to 2 to milliseconds, right? And sort of just, I don't know, it's kind of maybe it's a dumb topic, but something that I've been thinking about a bunch as you think about the horizontal scaling of the IC. But yeah, I think the personal canister concept is really cool. There's just a lot of really great projects like that. That's really where the opportunity is. Sometimes you have to go build an app first, to your point that you were just saying there. I went and built, these different things, and that made me realize, hey, there's a hole over here. So, I think, what the Partridge Labs, their kind of approach has been, we want to, tackle this particular category of apps. We're going to go build sort of a Patreon of Web3, and through the development of that, build out an open source, essentially a lot of the middleware that they have to create in order to enable that kind of app UI experience, right? So I think they kind of split their time like kind of 60-40, 50-50 on kind of building that stuff out and then launching those as separate, opportunities. And then, but using this kind of larger vision to kind of figure out, well, what are we missing? What do we need to build in order for this, app UI to exist? It's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, it really comes down to, like you said, the holes that are like, laying around everywhere for things like, a lot of things are still in alpha or beta too. So we got like all these packages moving forward, all the Dfinity packages, DFX, the SDK, CDKs, all that good stuff is constantly moving forward. So as every time there's a new feature, there's a chance for another piece of tooling. I'm personally a fan of open sourcing a lot of stuff and helping others to fill in those gaps. So it makes a lot of sense to me. It resonates heavily what you're saying, and your target interests for the internet computer definitely align. They make a lot of sense. So.
Yeah, there's one category that I think is going to be really huge on the internet computer that I don't think any other network is going to be capable of supporting. And really, it's just kind of this like fantastical future, that I just want to see happen because I'm a gamer and I love things like, Elder Scroll or No Man's Sky and all these kind of like procedurally generated worlds and diving into them and exploring them and et cetera. But I've been thinking about, sort of like a persistent VR environment, right? Where it's like, oh, it's a VR environment, but it's got real consequences, real history, right? I walk up to that tree and I chop it down with my axe and it falls over and I leave, and the next person kind of rolls by and they see, maybe several months later, and they see the same tree, but instead of, maybe it's already kind of started rotting a little bit or something, right? It's not like I'm dialing into a new instance or whatever. That's something that I think, and I think I saw somebody build something like that in the last hackathon, the super hackathon or whatever it was called, where they're rendering the entire environment natively on the IC. And I'm like, fuck, this idea of a persistent, real shared reality of VR is going to be massive, and way different than anything else that's out there. And then on top of that, because of the way Dfinity is designed, it can all run on chain, right? And that's huge. That's absolutely massive. I don't think there's any other network out there that can do something like that.
There is some things that come to mind when I think about that kind of stuff, because the Outpost is an open metaverse platform, so it's not exactly what you described, but it is a little different in the way that it has been designed, because there's some general problems even still with internet computer that can be solved with the internet computer, but that currently still exists, which is standards between games. This including data, metadata,
Yeah.
and 3D asset standards. And something
Yeah.
that we've worked on is the whole open in the metaverse thing.
Cool.
Is we're not using Unity or Unreal Engine
Hmm.
because that's actually a kind of a threshold. There's kind of some limitations there with WebGL and how you build. We're actually using a project that launched on Ethereum called Webaverse, which is an off-chain, web-based, completely JavaScript-based game engine that we've actually managed to port to a canister and run inside of a
No,
canister.
really?
And
That's awesome.
the engine is fully featured with it's still an alpha, mind you, but it's they open sourced it, so we forked it and did some cool stuff with it. It comes with like animations and all kinds of other stuff, but it uses kind of an interoperable form of VRM, which is a 3D model, which allows it to have a skeleton and animations.
That's cool.
And then you can have other VRMs. Like,
I'm super interested.
Yeah, you can have other VRMs come in, and it's kind of like this weird sort of alpha interoperability format. And we've actually been building a project on it for quite some time. So it's really focused on interoperability, but it's also VR capable.
Mm-hmm.
And that allows it to actually hold the worlds on chain, as well as the characters. It was it's really interesting and still definitely a work in progress, but we think that there might be some way to allow interoperability between Unity worlds, Unreal Engine worlds, and Webaverse worlds. So we're kind of looking into the big interoperability scheme.
Yeah, I've definitely been trying to find the company that's building the Unity of Web3. Like, I don't want to do a bastardized version of it. Like, who's going to go natively build, right, all the Unity components? That's definitely been something I've been looking for. Have yet to really find anyone that's been like really aggressively pursuing it. I've seen that we invested in a gaming project called Play Ember. They're running on the Near network. And they're kind of trying to pursue that sort of, Unity of Web3, mostly on the Near network. But they also have, I think, 15 or 20, apps, gaming apps as well, too, that already have a fair number of users on them. So it's kind of neat. They're kind of using, their kind of aggregate apps that they have and the users they have of all those games, and then at the same time building out all the component architecture underneath. And then the plan is, at least for them, to offer that out as like a protocol suite. So yeah, that stuff definitely needs to exist, because then we're going to get cooler games.
Like most we need to open source it. We need to open source it too. Like, it needs to be something that, like, 100%. If I have a working 3D interoperability standard for the asset and the NFT metadata, somebody should need to fork that repo, implement it in whatever their game framework is, and then that way you can walk from a portal in a Webaverse world into a Unity world, or one Webaverse world to another Webaverse world. And then we took the extra step of wanting to stick it in a canister, just to really see if we could do it at first. But it's really cool to be able to load up a canister address and have the entire game the entire Metaverse engine web served to you, and just kind of hop between rooms and worlds. It's like really, really cool.
Yeah.
But it's also like a really long time coming. The kind of goals that you want to go for with that interoperability stuff to get it right. It's gonna, it's a 2 to 3 year long thing.
It's a while. Yeah, it's going to be a while. I completely agree with you. Yeah, we invested in another company called Somnium Space. They're more EVM oriented, but they do like virtual worlds, and they have this concept of worlds that essentially, like, a world is an NFT. And so I can own a world, and then I can go in and there's like a whole builder framework associated with it. So you can go in and custom design this world. So like you could have Casino World, or you could have like Animal Planet or whatever, and then that world is represented by an NFT, and then you can buy, sell, and trade these different worlds. And they've been running that a lot of those things. It already exists, actually, but it's not running on chain, right? And that's the one thing I'm like, guys, you really need to get it on chain, but it's all EVM based, so obviously the resources to do that would be stupidly expensive. But you should go check it out.
Someone's working on that.
Concept.
There's someone working on EVM for IC right now, isn't there? A couple of people.
Yeah, Infinity Swap. That's one of our portfolio companies. They're I think weeks away from launching the EVM adapter. That's going to be awesome once that happens, because then you're going to be able to get the Infinity Swap guys.
Yeah,
like
I think
Max
Kyle
and Alex.
has some kind of relation with them, don't you, Kyle?
Yeah, we just partnered with them just like 2-3 weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
Got to well, one, I've knew their team for quite a bit. Daniel,
Great team.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they're crushing it. Like their marketing is just outstanding, and
Totally.
that was one of the things that like we really resonated on. Just because like the swap's been kind of trending with that. I guess like on data as well. Like we've been doing good for metrics.
Cool.
So it was just an easy place to kind of mutually come to agreement that like we're both going to be here long term. So might as well work together than against the grain. So.
Yeah, that's another tremendous set of founders. I've spent a lot of time with Max and Alex, and I love just sitting down with them. My favorite thing is just sitting down and having jam sessions like this, where we just talk about product ideas, different growth hacks, and, things that, we can do, taking some, I just had, got off a pitch for what is effectively like, kind of like, clubs where you could like form a club, and then you can join a club, and then you can get an NFT that is sort of like, is like a club membership card essentially, and it's all interest based. We like jam sessions on that kind of stuff of like, okay, well, how can you really juice the virality of it? How can you growth hack? Can you go do partnerships with like, say, an Equinox or, a Soho House or something like that to get them to give their members? And then is there a way that you can build, some kind of tokenomic scheme into the club itself, so that as, maybe like if they're staking and they're earning yield, that you can earn the yield at the club level, and then you have these kind of like guild concepts, and then now there's a treasury within the club, right? And then the club can vote on how to deploy that treasury to do club things. I love stuff like that. That stuff is so much fun. I could just sit there for hours having jam sessions on these kinds of things.
How do you feel? So I've seen a bit of interest from you in gaming, and I know you mentioned that earlier. And that's actually something Swap and I have been working on. His child platform, Go to Gamer, is going to be focused on bringing a bunch of Web3 gaming over here to the internet computer, and I'm currently working on a tournament hosting platform and potential ranking system using canisters, and I'll be integrating it into the Outpost Metaverse platform at some point, as well as some others.
Super interested in that stuff.
Yeah, kind of curious what your thoughts are and where you see Web3 gaming going.
Yeah, well, let's just point out the elephant in the room. Most Web3 games currently suck. They're not up to my standards, at least. But it's cool to see the different, ideas that are coming. Even just the whole scholars concept, right? Well, that's pretty cool. Play to earn as a concept, so badass. So like it's really interesting seeing these things come out. We're investors in a project called Community Gaming, which is doing sort of this kind of tournament platform, very similar with leaderboards and what I actually think, and actually Rainmaker Games as well too. We're investors in them, but I like this idea. I actually had the opportunity to spend time with Don Matrick before he took over Zynga from Mark Pincus, and he came into my office because we were doing Rally at the time, right? And I was trying to think about, hey, could I rally with my friends playing FIFA or Call of Duty and then donate tournament proceeds to like a charity or something. So like I'm FIFA for, some cause, or Call of Duty for like veterans causes, just as a way to create rallyable achievements inside games. And I learned a lot about the whole achievements framework through him, because I think he started, or is the one that's mostly credited for taking Xbox to, I think it's more installed than PlayStation, if I recall, in terms of unit installs and homes. And talked a lot about, okay, if you're going to be a AAA game, you need, X number of achievements inside your game to be a AAA game, right? Because badge collecting and achievements are such a big deal across all these things. Anyways, what I have sort of thought a lot about, especially when it comes to gaming, is how could you create an achievement system that maybe could be used by games, but could actually be spread across the entire internet computer. So regardless of whether I'm using open chat or playing a game or whatever, it's kind of a global achievement system.
From a developer perspective, I would think a system could best be designed that maybe there's a standard format of how achievements are created, and you give open source tooling and documentation to each game to allow them to fill in their own achievement boards. And then use the tooling on the back end to process that database and make it immutable.
Yeah, because think about it, like we like questing, right? Like I love questing as much as any other gamer, but what if you could do questing across every fucking application on the planet? Like I'm questing while I'm working in, some future version of, Google Docs or Microsoft Word, and questing while I'm chatting with my friends, and I'm kind of globally collecting this kind of achievement system. Could be a really interesting way to growth hack a network, because people love achievements, right? They love these things. So I've been thinking a lot about that. And I know that, a lot of people are kind of pursuing it mostly from a gaming perspective. But if you built it out as like a general purpose, like achievement system concept, there's no reason why you couldn't build achievements into just, like I said, a Google Docs of Web3, right? Could very easily do that. That's the beauty of Web3, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the achievement system you're talking about. For Go to Gamer, we basically have already like established some esports connections.
Cool.
We brought Mazer into the IC. They're kind of just getting their feet wet. And they play like live tournaments and all this, get like 25 million views a month and all this, and they're just kind of waiting for our tournament canister to kind of be ready.
Sweet.
And we kind of see a future, or at least I see a future where we're based completely on chain with internet computer, and where there's a gaming hub aspect, and makes it just super easy for everyone to kind of play these tournaments and games all in one place. So I don't know, like I'm familiar with community gaming. And I'm actually I was surprised when I saw that like you're invested in them already, because like
part of our gaming stack.
yeah, like and they're really cool. Like I really have a lot of respect for them. And I just thought it could be a step further with the way the internet computer is designed, just because it could be a DApp on chain, which just makes it very unique. And I recall seeing like the what like their investment round was. It was like a couple million.
I think they recently raised like 20 mil. I mean, they're over. They got a great valuation now. I think SoftBank led their last round. Yeah, they're great company. Chris is awesome. I've spent more time with him. That's a really great project for sure. I think they're kind of pursuing it in all the right ways. Rainmaker is also one that we funded with Coin Fund. They were doing sort of like a Steam, like they were kind of focused on a decentralized Steam, which I still think is a really good idea. But they've sort of shifted now into more of that kind of like leaderboard achievement frameworks, gaming clubs, and so on. I think that's mainly just because they're trying to build up the sort of demand side pressure for distributing games, which the distribution of games is still not totally solved, and that's why I think you're gonna need something like a Steam to exist. Alongside sort of a growing number of Web3 games that ultimately launch, and you're always going to have some kind of distribution. But if you could tie it back to some sort of general purpose achievement framework, that could be another way to aggregate users around some kind of distribution channel.
Yeah, absolutely.
A piece of this is honestly, it's going to be when all these pieces are built out. And
exactly.
then we get to connect them, and everything gets interconnected. And that's what I really think when people are like, ICP is the metaverse chain. It's like, does that mean a metaverse? Does that mean a bunch of metaverses, or does that mean everybody's projects are have some level of interoperability and some capacity to share data between each other? And that's why I think they call it the metaverse chain. So kind of working in that direction too, and just
that's cool.
Kind of thinking about that.
It's funny because like every time I hear somebody talk about metaverse or they talk about Meta building the metaverse, I'm like, guys, it's not a metaverse unless it's built on a blockchain. Like you can't have true ownership. Like if I can't have true ownership, it's not a metaverse in my mind. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, and
so. It's a term that's got to be defined yet. So we're hopefully going to play in the role alongside many others in developing whatever that comes to mean at the end of the day.
We invested in Mino. We've actually done a lot of gaming investments now that I think about it. We invested in Mino Games. You guys should go check them out. I'm going to try to get them to go build some stuff on the IC, I think, as well, too, for some of the stuff that they're kind of going after. But Sasha, he's the founder of Mino Games. He's so cool. He was the chief of staff to Mark Pincus, I think, and sort of like a real senior guy. So he's got the whole like Zynga playbook, and he was running Mino, which is a really successful. I don't think it's an indie studio, but basically it's a small studio. Small, they have pretty significant ARR already. But he's like, he pitched me. He's like, I'm going to go build the first, $100 billion game. I'm like, yes, come on over here. Let's chat. But he's a really cool dude, and he's got some great investors. Don Matrick, I think, invested in this last round with us, and another guy. His name's Bean Gordon. Bean Gordon was the chief creative officer of EA way back when, and then became a partner at Kleiner Perkins. He is a cool cat. He is a really cool dude. Knows more about gaming as an investor than anybody I've ever met. And he really coached Mark Pincus in the early days of building Zynga. But yeah, you should go check out, they're launching a new game called Dimensionals, which is going to be kind of like an RPG, kind of party-based, character-based system, which I think is going to be really awesome. And he's going to be building in some functionality that I think is just going to be totally fucking awesome. There's this concept in gaming. I think it's called what do you call it? It's like CompuGotcha, but it's like effectively kind of like it's so addictive as a game mechanic that it literally is banned in Japan. Right? It's so addictive. And I think with basically it's like loot boxes essentially, and being able to get assets out of a loot box, but then more importantly the ability to craft different game assets together to make more interesting or more rare game assets. So if you think about that particular game mechanic, like we've all been in games where you do crafting or whatever, and then you kind of put them together and you make this new thing. You can imagine a game mechanic like that where you could do this is kind of the way I thought, you could do cross-season composability, right? So you've got your different seasons of games or franchises or expansions, however you want to call it. But you could say like, okay, well, nobody's playing the previous expansion, but what if I could go and farm some kind of in-game asset in a previous expansion or a previous season, I earn that asset. I go play season 2 or expansion 2 or whatever. I go farm some other kind of asset, and then I could essentially craft one asset that can only be acquired in playing, season 1 or expansion 1, and then combine that with another asset that can only be acquired or farmed in expansion 2. And then by virtue of having one asset from one and one asset from another, you can merge them into a fundamentally new rare asset, right? So that would ultimately drive players back to previous versions or previous things, so that you're kind of always running around these different expansions and keeping gamer attention live while you're doing that. I thought that would be kind of neat when you think about that kind of ability tied back to that kind of game mechanic. It's just going to keep people in your ecosystem.
Yeah, and like I do love that. With like the season kind of pass where you can merge it. A way I kind of thought about that is like being able to have different NFT projects kind of burn a mechanism to create a new feature, a new item as well. Like it blows my mind that a lot of people aren't necessarily thinking about that in a way. Because it creates a whole new form of unity in this 100%. Blockchain industry, and that's going to be a huge driving aspect. Because what if you have two of these really rare NFTs, and all of a sudden you merge them together, and all of a sudden, boom, it's like this crazy ultra rare asset that maybe almost like 100 people have it in the world, like that. It just creates a whole new market, and kind of touching. Yeah, like and touching into, you mentioned play to earn earlier. I know, like, and we all are under the same impression that a lot of blockchain games just aren't that attractive right now. Play to earn is not obviously going to work for every game, and there's going to be a need for a platform. I would assume like a Steam or Go to Gamer and all this with adding in all this tooling, that it's going to have to assume the role that it's going to have a token to help these games that want to do play to earn, and maybe even have like raffle systems and stuff to actually earn other items.
Well, it eventually kind of becomes the new launch pad for games, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because you've aggregated, and it's like, okay, what are my Steam coins worth? I can't really spend them on anything useful, but I should be able to spend them in game, But I totally agree with you on that one. You're gonna need that. You're gonna need some kind of like incentive model to keep bringing people back to the distribution channel. But and even more so, it's like if you become the place through some kind of tokenomic scheme that people want to keep coming back to access games, you become the default launch pad for any future game. And if you become the default launch pad for any future game, then you could create all sorts of really cool incentive models where it's like, okay, new game launching, and because you're a top 10 coin holder for the distribution platform, you get first access, right? That's cool, right? That's really cool stuff. That's like standing in line outside of old school Best Buy waiting for the new Call of Duty to come out, right? That's what that feels like.
For sure. That's kind of, I think that's going to be one of the end results of implementing kind of a 3D interoperable system, especially with the 3D, like the 3D world stuff, especially in the assets, is because then people are going to be able to set up a launchpad portal for their new 3D game. And have that portal be inside of an existing 3D game or metaverse or social world, whatever you want to call it, and then allow people to actually connect. And like, imagine like that portal opening up at noon on a certain day, and you got people, lining up at the portal to sign up with their wallet to be the first 100 in the world or something. And the portal opens, and they all just pile in. I'm somewhere in between today's modern Call of Duty and 2003 RuneScape.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's so cool. No, I'm excited about that future. I think the composable nature of it is just good, and then you're going to be able to get into really cool things. Like that's when GameFi becomes a thing, right? GameFi is kind of like not really there right now, but once you've got mass user adoption, right? And you can have these kind of multi-world, metaverse environments. You're really going to start being able to do a lot more like, blending of these different verticals. So it's like, okay, now I can really, it's not just, the auction house inside of, World of Warcraft. It's a global auction house for all assets, for all games. And that's so massive. Like, I can't wait for that to exist. I'm literally just waiting. It will be there, right? Wayne's World, if you build it, they will come, right?
Yeah, like the industry itself for gaming is already like $160 billion, and crypto's gonna drive it to trillions.
Easy.
Like it's just
Easy.
exactly. It's insane.
Easy.
And like we've already seen certain NFT collections reach $1 billion secondary. Like it's gonna blow everyone's mind when gaming goes to like tens of trillions. Like it's just I foresee that like happening.
It's definitely going to happen, right? It's totally going to happen because also like what's a game, right? Like what is a game? When you compare it to like the metaverse, like is the metaverse a game? I mean, you could gamify basically anything. I could be going into the metaverse just to go to work, right? And sit at a virtual computer and take customer support calls and gamify my, success rate and closing happy customers or something, right? That and then I get paid on a per unit basis for everything. So these things are all merging right now, and then it's like, okay, well, is that a game? Well, that sounds like an economy to me. Well, and if it's an economy, it could be tens of trillions. It could be, even bigger, right? And I've always kind of like struggled with like what, this makes me think like, um, you know, if you could estimate the value of the internet, what is the internet worth, right? We really can't really do that. I mean, I guess you could say like the way I try to think about it is, well, I guess you would value it at least global GDP, right? Global GDP is 97 trillion. Okay, well, that doesn't account for real assets. Real assets will tack on another couple hundred trillion there. And then you have derivative assets, and that just takes it into like stupid level numbers. So, what is the value of the internet? What is the value of Web3? I mean, you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of trillions of dollars and value that will be moving onto a Web3 stack, because every application in the future will be this kind of open autonomous software concept. There's no, it's inevitable, right? It's just going to happen. Maybe it takes 10 years, maybe it takes 15 years. The inevitability is still there. And so, for the first time, we're going to be able to be a shareholder in the internet, right? And that's so fucking awesome. Which makes it really, important when you look at, okay, well, all of Web3, I think what today is maybe $1 trillion. It depends on what time you look at the market, but fast forward, how long will it take before we achieve full saturation of Web3? When does Web3 replace Web2, if you will? The original internet took 25 years. If you go back to TCP/IP, which was released in 95, let's call it maybe 30, just for simple numbers. So, if you say, okay, well, basic technological laws, the next version of anything should happen twice as fast. So maybe that next version is 15 years. And when do you start the clock? Do I start the clock at the launch of Ethereum? Okay, if I did that, then I'm looking at full saturation of Web3 by 2030, which seems like, wow, that's too short, right? It needs more time than that. And then we realized, wait a second, we went from no iPhone to a supercomputer in my pocket in 10 years? That's fucking amazing. Like the amount of technical innovation that can happen over 10 years. And by the way, because everything's composable, right? You actually end up having faster innovation cycles, right? So the innovation cycles are much longer today because there's no incentive model to share Legos in the sandbox, right? But now we're going to have this incentive model that allows us to share these like Legos in the sandbox, where it's like, yeah, I'll use your component, no problem. I'm incentivized to. So you'll end up with innovation cycles that are getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, And then at the same time, you'll end up having a scenario where, you know, the sort of token distribution timeline, you know, I think most of our projects, you know, if you go early days, they were taking 4 to 5 years before there was a token. Now we're looking at 18 to 24 months on average. And pretty soon, I bet we can get it down to 0, right? Where I spin up a GitHub repo and boom, default governance mechanism built into it, right? I haven't even written code yet. So when you tie that with the faster innovation cycles, you know, at some point, you know, one of these networks is going to hit escape velocity, and then everything will be powered by Web3. And we won't even know it, right? We'll just be using apps like we do every day, and we won't even know it's being powered by Web3. And I hope, you know, if we're using the word blockchain 10 years from now, right, like something's probably gone horribly wrong.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
I had an interesting question on that point for you. I feel like you sound like you definitely have not only like you mentioned that the thesis that you have for this stuff, but what do you think? What do you think is one of the best ways to or approaches to start pushing adoption? Pushing is probably a bad word for it, but basically, what do you think? What do you think is the best way for projects specifically to adopt users from Web 2 into Web 3? For me, it's like education is key. But everybody has a different view on it, so I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, you know, so there's a couple things that kind of come to mind. First, if any of you haven't read it yet, I would highly recommend reading a book called The Inevitable. It's written by a guy named Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly was the founding editor of Wired magazine. So he talks a lot about the inevitability of technology, right? You know, so like, you know, the inevitability of electricity, the inevitability of the car, the inevitability of the wheel, things like that, right? And it's a really great book. It's very philosophical. It's very tech focused. He's sort of like a modern day tech philosopher. You know, I've had numerous opportunities to meet with him and sit down and have little interview sessions with him. So I think inevitability, right, is the thing. The other sort of piece that ties into that is technology always gravitates towards the lowest transaction cost, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, for me, you know, historically, to get in my car, drive, go to the library, get a book, right? The transaction cost is stupidly high. But then Google came out, right? And Google basically said, I'm going to basically take that transaction cost of information or knowledge gathering, not 0, but pretty damn close to 0. And so I think as we think about that, by and large, right, that is the inevitability of technology, right? It's always going towards the lowest transaction cost. And when you think about a blockchain computer, you know, you have instant sort of instant contextual awareness, right? Your transaction cost is basically 0. I may not be permissioned, right? But it is effectively 0 because we're running in the same environment. And so I think that in itself is inevitable, first. Second is because that is what's inevitable, and because technology will gravitate towards that direction anyways, it's just time at the end of the day. It's time for user adoption. It's people building components. It's people building apps. And over time, users will naturally migrate over from Web 2 to Web 3. So that's why I don't invest heavily in Web 2.5, because it's like, well, the users are eventually going to be there, right? It's just sort of this kind of like inevitability statement. So if that is inevitable, then why would I invest in Web 2.5? I'd rather go invest in very crypto native projects that are pursuing, you know, composability as a core, right? This kind of universal composability. And so, you know, I kind of think about that. And then from there, I like to think about, okay, because I'm such a strategic long-term investor when it comes to these kinds of things, you know, kind of we talked about a little bit earlier today, what are the categories of applications that are gonna drive up the underlying layer 1 network value? Well, it's going to be things that have high CPU consumption, right? So it's going to be games, finance apps, video. So I'm very aggressive. If I do anything app-based, it's really thinking about app layer investments that drive high demand, right? And so those are really clear categories. Other things like, tokenization of real assets. I think tokenization of real assets is going to be massive, and it's going to bring an enormous amount of liquidity into a Web3 environment, because you're talking about just real estate assets alone, $80 trillion. When I can tokenize real estate, you're going to basically unlock enormous amounts of liquidity that's going to be available on a Web3 network. So you're going to have these kind of like monumental shifts over time where things like that happen. And so I think, I try to think more categorically of what are the things that are going to unlock really important key elements of Web3 adoption, such as gaming and so on. And then users will eventually come, right? And so I know that's not like very specific of like, oh, I'm going to invest in gaming apps, but it is sort of categorically there, because you can go back to some very basic. I don't know if you guys have read it. There's another really great book I would recommend. It's called Crossing the Chasm. It's kind of a old hand college business, book. It's really short, super easy to read, but it's like the whole idea is like, when you're bringing something new to market, right, you have to cross the chasm. You have your early adopters, right? Early adopters also happen to be gamers. They also happen to be, people that want to watch YouTube videos, finance people, right? They're willing to go to the edge of innovation to get the edge. And so you're marketing directly to that. And so if you think about those same categories, like, not only am I going to go after high CPU consumption categories, but I'm also going to target categories where I know these are the kinds of early adopters. They already know what gems are. They just can't own them, and so crossing the chasm. And at some point you cross that chasm and then boom, mass market adoption, right? So that's the way I would think about it. I think gaming, you guys focusing on gaming, is a great vertical. But to your point earlier, there's a lot of like middleware that's just missing, right? And so focusing on building out that middleware, and to be frank, that's where the real opportunity is going to be from a return perspective. If you build the universal achievements component architecture or protocol that everybody wants to use, dude, that's going to be so fucking massive. It's way bigger than Unity ever could be,
Yeah, one of the reasons I'd like to touch on why we have we're doing Go to Gamer and the Swop. The Swop's like our multimedia entertainment. The way I kind of see how the industry is going to break down, right? With gaming, we saw it come to social media, and for the first time ever, we're going to see it happen in like your everyday magazines, comics, and all of that. That's just how it's going to pan out with AR and all that. So like you'll go to grab whatever, maybe it's like, let's just say it's Time magazine, whatever, right? And all of a sudden you're flipping through the pages and you have your smart glasses on, or an augmented reality scan where all of a sudden you're playing like chess or tic-tac-toe against 100%. Someone else in the world, or you maybe step into a metaverse from a magazine. Yep. Or an escape room or a puzzle room, and you unlock something to get an NFT collectible or whatever, and maybe you're one of the first to do it, so you get a super rare. And that's just how I foresee like media and gaming kind of working together. And that's
the same thing these
so
days,
many
right?
things. Yeah, it's crazy, and it blows my mind. And like I don't know if like people are really thinking about how that's going to pan out, but they really play a key part in each other's success.
Well, you look at Facebook, Google, Apple, they're not tech companies, they're media companies, right? When you look at Apple, they have almost 1 billion wallets. They've got massive large-scale distribution of media because they, created hardware that people love and is fashionable, right? They're distributing content, games, apps, whatever. It's a media platform. Same with Google, right? Same with Facebook. They're media platforms more than they are tech companies. They used tech to get to scale. Once they had scale, that gave them distribution. Once they had distribution, they could sell anything. Same thing with Amazon, right? Sell books, now I sell everything. Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there with like even just that kind of augmented. I wouldn't call that like, you know, um, that. What is it? The sort of digital fashion stuff, where I could essentially be wearing some kind of piece of clothing, and we have several investors in our fund that are big fashion houses, right? And they're already experimenting with this stuff, right? Where you can, put some kind of like a chip or whatever into a piece of clothing, or even as a thread, right? And then when somebody takes your photo, right? I'm just looking at the normal photo, but maybe I put on my AR VR glasses and all of a sudden it's like this really cool dress that's like burning with flames and all sorts of cool shit going on. Like that stuff kind of already exists, and now it's going to come in form of NFT, and then I'm going to be scrolling through my Instagram feed, put on my AR glasses, and everybody looks totally different, right? That's going to be really awesome. And I think that's probably one of those kinds of things will probably end up kind of merging those two media worlds together.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the smart glasses they're expected to be out soon in the industry.
Very soon.
And all of a sudden you're walking down the street. I know they have it in test locations and stuff, but
Yep.
all of a sudden you're walking down the street and all of a sudden, if you don't have your glasses on, like you're just a normal person, or you do have them on and all of a sudden you're a Bored Ape or, whatever
so
NFT.
Excited about that.
And that's going to have everyone like losing their minds. And
I know. It's gonna be awesome.
I'm just so excited for this industry. It's going to be so cool.
Yeah. Well, cool, guys. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on to chat. I'm happy to do it anytime. Just reach out. Love talking product.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure to have you on. It was different from our previous spaces. We've been doing quite a bit, so happy to have you back anytime. And I know you said you're going to be at the ICP Community Conference in May.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep. Yeah. We're investors in Coden State with Artia and Cedric over there. Great founders. So we'll be there. Hopefully we'll see some of y'all.
Awesome. And then any other conferences and stuff that you might be at in the near term for anyone that's looking to connect with you?
I'm going to skip Consensus. I've been super focused. Operationally, we have 50, we've invested in 57 projects. So, there's a lot of founders with that. And it's been, a pretty challenging 12 to 18 months, so we've been really, when we invest in founders, we don't just give them money and then like walk away. Like we actually roll up our sleeves. We go in, we'll even sit in the office and like help them, think about, achievement, whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. Like we're pretty hands-on from that perspective, which is pretty rare, I think, in terms of the general sort of VC space. I really want our founders to think that we're not just investors, we're actually we're partners, at the end of the day. So, I've been pretty dialed in. I was on the conference circuit a little bit more last year, but I'll hit Bitcoin Miami just because it's also tied to, the ICP community event. And then I'll probably be, mostly kind of in the Europe zone. I have been more going to a lot of family office conferences lately to try to help a lot of these kind of like family offices better understand crypto, because I go to these conferences, they're talking about Bitcoin, which is cool that they're doing that, but they're fundamentally missing like the whole grand vision of Web3. So I'm in on a little bit of a listening learning tour, trying to help more investors better understand how to invest in Web3 without just kind of putting money into some like shit coin, or professor coin or whatever. And hoping that it pops, be a little bit more strategic in how they do that. So we'll see for sure. Coden States, ICP community event, and then also Bitcoin Miami. Those are definitely on the horizon. We'll see what comes after that. I usually try to go to Art Basel in Miami. That's a super, super fun one to go to. So I'll be probably running around there as well too in the fall.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Again, we appreciate your time.
Yep.
And,
Thanks, guys. Good chatting.
I'll be reaching out to you as well with a couple of different things. So take
Yeah,
a look
send
at
me an email.
more
I'd
about
love
the
to.
Outpost.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that, and also some of the component stuff that you're. Shoot me an email. I'd be happy to chat with you about
absolutely.
that. And Product Jam anytime.
Is there a way you want me to get the email address from you? Is
yeah,
DM on Twitter, or my DMs are open on Twitter if you'd like to reach out.
Okay, yeah, just
I don't know if yours are.
just DM me and I'll shoot you my email. I'm hesitant to give out my email because I already get too much.
Yeah, it looks like your DMs are off, so you might have to shoot me.
I have your email, Tom, so I can give it to Daniel. If that works.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks,
awesome.
guys.
Yeah, I'll be reaching out. Yeah, thanks for your time, man. I really appreciate it. It was awesome to get to know you more, and look forward to having you up again.
All right. Chat soon. Have a good one.
Everyone have a great day. Night.
Bye.